In just the past 24 to 48 hours, a flood of anti-Giuliani news has come out, and it makes me wonder seriously, is he going to survive this thing? Because I know that nobody loves saying, more than me, that nothing matters and there are no consequences for anything, but that specifically really refers to Donald Trump and his family. His associates have gone to jail, and Rudy Giuliani seems pretty well positioned at this point to be the next one to join Manafort and Cohen. I'm John Iadarola, live video for the Damage Report in anticipation of the live show, which will happen in a half an hour, in which I'm going to be joined by Emma Vigeland. We're going to be breaking down some big news from around the world, also a big environmental wrap-up piece. It's probably too much to actually fit in the time I'm going to be giving it, but some important updates there that I definitely want to get to. So let's go through this. There's 6 pieces of news, or 5 pieces of news, and something fun to close it out there. The most important one, though, and probably the worst news for Giuliani, is the news that Lev Parnas, one of his associates, the weird mafiosos that he was working with to get information about what was going on in Ukraine, has apparently flipped and is going to be cooperating with federal investigators, with the impeachment inquiry. So he's now formally going to be cooperating. He'd initially hired former Trump lawyer John Dowd, and refused to cooperate with congressional investigations, but he apparently discarded that lawyer, got a new one, is now going to be complying with subpoenas for both his testimony and also for documents. And what's interesting is that from early on, Donald Trump has been trying to distance himself from Lev Parnas and his associate, Fruman. He said initially, I don't know them, I don't know about them, I don't know what they do, maybe they were clients of Rudy, you'd have to ask Rudy, and then a flood of stuff came out showing them partying it up at exclusive parties and hanging out and everything, and so that didn't last. It's going to be interesting to see if Giuliani starts doing that more. I mean, we've seen the videos of them drunk and hanging out and all that stuff. But as Parnas gets ready to testify formally, to hand over documents, perhaps travel documents, perhaps any transcripts or any sort of logs of conversations and things like that, I wonder if Giuliani will start to pull a Trump in that respect. Now, a little bit more information from the New York Times that initially broke the story. While it's not clear what documents or testimony Mr. Parnas might provide, he was intimately involved with Mr. Giuliani's efforts. Along with Mr. Fruman, he traveled repeatedly to Ukraine in search of information about corruption involving the Bidens and pushed for the ouster of the United States ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch, who we're going to have more on in just a second, who Mr. Trump and Mr. Giuliani saw as hostile to the president, and specifically hostile to not turning over this area of the State Department and its efforts to the Donald Trump re-election campaign, effectively. Really fast, I see Max Powers saying something about not being able to rewind TYT videos. I haven't experienced that. I'm not familiar with it, but hopefully it will get fixed. Now, more on Yovanovitch. So that is another area where Giuliani was way more involved than anyone who's not a formal part of the U.S. government. He's just Trump's informal lawyer should be. He apparently had been spreading effectively gossip or at least attacks about this diplomat for some time. And we found out, I believe it was yesterday, that the State Department actually contacted Sean Hannity to find out if the allegations about her that Giuliani had been spreading were true. Now, understand that Sean Hannity denies that this actually happened, but he's a liar, so who the hell knows at this point whether it actually happened or not. But it is bizarre. That's what our government looks like right now, though. Someone who's not a part of government spreads lies that have to be corroborated by someone who is a right-wing hack in Fox News. So that's weird. We do have that full testimony now. That is available. You can go take a look at that. The Vinland testimony is also available. I believe those are the only 2 that have been released in their entirety. It's possible that those are the ones that Donald Trump was referencing when he said that Shifty Schiff is going to release fake transcripts. But interestingly, Jim Jordan, when asked about this, whether he trusts the content and veracity of the actual written testimony when it comes out, he said, yeah, it's the testimony. I don't know what you want out of it. So you can go take a look at that if you want and find out more about that. What's interesting, though, let's see. Joe, thank you for the offer. Getting married very soon, though, but thank you for the offer. Anyway, what's interesting is that with all this news coming out, you might wonder, where's Rudy Giuliani? Because although initially when the Ukraine scandal was starting to develop and impeachment was getting moved for, he was all over Fox News, he hasn't really been seen all that much recently. And we might have an explanation as to why that is, coming from a Vanity Fair article. So this is quoting former Ukrainian diplomat Andrei Telezenko, who says, "We're friends now," and told NBC News that he just had a recent Manhattan meeting with Giuliani during which they discussed, quote, political updates and, quote, what are the reforms going to be for Ukraine, with that former Ukrainian diplomat saying he respects our country. So I have to give Giuliani credit for boldness, because apparently, as he's getting more and more wrapped up in this story, and although he doesn't have to worry about impeachment or anything like that, it is entirely possible that he committed some sort of crime. We'll find out further. He's apparently still doing it. Like the trying to go through these back channels to find out what's happening in Ukraine. He's doing that now. Like, as this is going on, people are going and testifying. His former associates are going to be testifying against him, providing caches of documents and things like that. He's still doing it. That is, I don't know if it's consciously bold or if it's just, he's so detached and delusional about the current situation that he's in legally, that he feels like he can continue it. But he's doing it right now. And also, the thing is, I've believed for a long time that Donald Trump and Giuliani and Sean Hannity, the people who really seem to believe that Ukraine had something on Joe Biden, that they didn't necessarily have to actually believe it. They just had to have it be a thing that was being talked about. If the Ukrainian president came out and said he was doing these investigations, it doesn't matter whether they end up finding something. It will have done its damage. But Rudy Giuliani continuing to try to figure this stuff out, even while he's going down, mid-go down, that implies maybe he does actually think something that is there. Maybe he's actually a truer believer in this Trump-style thing than we thought, that it's not strictly, a sort of political calculation, that they actually think that something's there. If you were a friend of Rudy Giuliani, that should worry you. Now, if you're not a friend of Giuliani, you might be Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon, obviously, he had his day with Donald Trump, many days, and then eventually he was cast under the bus like so many are. And ever since then, for the most part, even though he was viciously attacked by Donald Trump, he has been trying to work his way back into the halls of power. I guess some people's desire for influence is stronger than their actual self-esteem. And so he said this recently, and this is a fine statement, honestly, by itself. He said, Rudy Giuliani, whom we all admire and many of us love, looks like he may have gotten over his skis on some of this situation in Ukraine. I think the president's going to have to rethink his legal team. So that is pitched as if it's a defense of Rudy Giuliani. But of course, it is advising Donald Trump to cut ties with Giuliani, something that he apparently considered early on. You probably remember some of that video that we played at that time. Now, that attack against Giuliani is not going to be well accepted by defenders of Giuliani and himself. And we don't have a comment from Giuliani himself. Asked about this, he wouldn't say anything. But some people are apparently trying to use this tiff between Bannon and Giuliani to themselves either work themselves into the good graces of Donald Trump or potentially just Rudy Giuliani. So a memo was sent to the Daily Beast last week, unsolicited, by a Giuliani ally who is not cited. It's only revealed on condition of anonymity, unfortunately. But it was a former aide on his 2008 presidential campaign, lest you forget that Rudy Giuliani once believed he would be president. So it laid out a series of attacks on Steve Bannon under a header describing him as, quote, the latest fox in the Trump house. It recounted his exit from the White House, his ouster from Breitbart News, his past criticism of the Trump family, and his affiliation with a controversial Chinese billionaire, suggesting that he might have some sort of financial relationship that potentially could be damaging if Trump were to get involved with him once again. The memo states, quote, although Steve Bannon has been parading himself over at Fox News as an ally of President Trump, in reality, he has been hitting the president's personal lawyer, the only man standing between the president and Democrats in Congress bloodthirsty for impeachment, which definitely seems to pitch it as an attempt to ingratiate themselves to Rudy Giuliani, who thinks that he's not the only defender, and he's certainly not one of the strongest ones. He can barely defend himself, but that's what it says. And what's interesting is that same memo was not just sent to the Daily Beast, it was also sent to Fox News. So I don't know what the objective is in sending it to Daily Beast. They're not going to pursue that line, but Fox News might. And so that was, I guess, a semi-savvy move on the part of those writing this, who, again, we don't actually know. Now, according to sources, this was done without Giuliani's like he didn't know about it. He didn't okay it personally. And so I don't know that I 100% trust that. if Giuliani's worried about being pushed out of the White House and not receiving that protection from the president that some of his other allies have received, I could see that as being a thing that Giuliani would be involved in, but it's also conceivable that somebody could be exploiting this tiff between the two. And so that is going on too. And again, it's going on while Giuliani has largely sort of gone back into the shadows. He's not out in front on Fox News defending himself. He's apparently too busy doing his shadow diplomacy still. I don't know that Bannon has any chance in hell of getting back into Donald Trump's inner circle. It seems like a waste of time, but at least some of Giuliani's supposed allies are worried about it. Now, in terms of being worried about Giuliani, who again isn't really defending himself, some people like his strategy. They are savvy political operatives of their own right. One is Donald Trump Jr., who said, I think in his role, he's outside of government that way, but in his role, I think he's doing a good job. I don't know what that's intended to mean. Defending him, doing his diplomacy, I don't know. It's weird to both acknowledge that he's doing a good job working for Donald Trump while also acknowledging that he's not a part of government. I don't know if that's an attempt to create a little bit of distance between the two, so that if it turns out that Rudy Giuliani has done something really bad and then it comes out, especially once Parnas starts testifying, that it would be a little bit harder to link it directly to Donald Trump. That seems like a lost cause at this point, considering all that we found out through multiple rounds of testimony at this point. Now, I've said many times throughout this video that Giuliani has not really been doing a great job of defending himself. He apparently does have something planned, though. He tweeted recently, and I will show it to you, this image saying, stay tuned to my Instagram at, he wrote at, and then he put at, the Rudy Giuliani. And it says, in a full image with his signature in a meme, you have to wonder why the media is all of a sudden hell-bent on slandering me. I've got the evidence extending high and wide. So that's, every part of that meme is weird. I don't know what that's going to be. I am a little bit worried, though. Does Rudy Giuliani not know why the media is focusing on him like over the past month? Does he not get? I get he thinks he's innocent, but he doesn't know why the media is focusing on him. It's entirely possible that he has nothing. It's entirely, I mean, that's the sort of thing, saying he's got the evidence extending high and wide. I mean, that's effectively Donald Trump's go-to move. I mean, even about Vinland, I believe it was yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, they had asked, what evidence do you have that he's an ever-Trumper? You keep saying he's an ever-Trumper, but what is the evidence for that? And he says, oh, it'll be coming soon. But he says that about so many things. And then people move on in a day or in a week, and it never comes out, but it didn't need to. It accomplished its goal, even in its vagueness. Maybe Rudy Giuliani has learned some stuff from Donald Trump. Is this going to be enough for him to avoid some sort of legal penalties for the work that he did? I don't know. It's possible that it's more of a crime for Donald Trump as the politician to have this work being done on his behalf and to be pushing for it individually than for any one individual American to be conducting this work on their own. I don't know yet that he's actually committed any crimes. It seems like I would put him third on the list in terms of legal liability after Donald Trump and William Barr, who, to my constant frustration, has so far evaded any consequences for his effort to bury this entire thing. At some point, that's going to need to be brought up. I don't know why the Democrats aren't making a bigger deal out of it, because as of right now, he is still in his position of a great deal of power and authority in the Department of Justice, and for all we know is continuing to do efforts behind the scenes to stop this investigation from going forward, or at least for getting access to needed documents, audio tapes, things like that. And I think that the Democrats are avoiding bringing William Barr into this in a more real way, to their own major detriment if they want this impeachment to actually go forward. Okay, so that's the 5.5 stories, all of it looking pretty bad for Rudy Giuliani. We're going to have to see. I mean, he's one of Trump's closest allies at this point. Maybe he believes against all of the evidence that Trump will defend him to the bitter end, but that is not who Donald Trump is at all. And so if at some point it looks like Rudy Giuliani is dead weight and could actually drag down his presidency, he is going to cut the cord. He already gave hints of that early on. It could be coming. Okay, everybody, there's a lot of you here. If you have any comments or questions, I will let you know that the live show is in less than 20 minutes. So we've got this big roundup of air and water environmental regulation changes that are going on right now that should be really worrying. So we're going to be talking about that. With Emma, we're going to be breaking down the Richard Spencer tape and CNN's attempt to normalize Richard Spencer, as well as we're going to be doing a little roundup of news about Pete Buttigieg, who has been making some bold claims recently. We're going to see if he can actually back those up. And then we're going to have Meanwhile in as well. So news from Brazil, from China, and from Germany. 3 really dark stories. And so there you go. Let's see. Thank you, Felicia. That's very nice of you. You have these glasses? Yeah, prove it. What brand are they? I wouldn't be surprised if you do. They're not very expensive. You can get them at the mall. But let me know. Is he literally toast? No. He's wrinkled. More than toasted. Diablo 4 or Death Stranding? Diablo 4, I mean, that might not be out for 2 years. Death Stranding, I would want to try, but I've heard that it's really long and really slow and arguably boring, even while it's interesting. I'm not sure. Kaylin, thank you. Rebecca says, which Republican do you think could overtake his nomination? At this point, I would say none. I don't think that there's any Republican. That could change over time, though. Complex, thank you for that 30th birthday wish. Let's see. Alan, you can try, but it's never going to die. Gen Con next year? Yeah, I think Gen Con. I don't think you're ever going to see a TYT panel at Gen Con, but I would love to go to it again. We'll see. How did you become such a... that's trolling. Do you think Jim Henson is an anti-Semite after watching Dark Crystal? You're going to need to give me more detail there. I mean, I've thought a lot about the sort of political allegory in the Dark Crystal, but I don't know anything about anti-Semitism in it. It's possible. I did get that. Blow on the screen to blow out the candles of your cake. Supra, I have installed Outer Worlds. I've played the first like 40 minutes or so, but I have not had almost any time to play video games recently. And so both that and Disco Elysium are just sitting with just the barest bit of play so far. Pompous Pompeo going down? I don't know. I think he's evaded. I mean, look, he's obviously involved. He's come up in some of the testimony, but I think that he's facing less jeopardy than some of the others. Last of Us 2 is delayed. Yeah, that is sad. I would love to play that. The first one was great. Why was that a Sharpie? It was a highlighter. I highlight things. Okay. Wait, what was that from? No, Beardcore, we do, because against all of my efforts in 2015 and 2016, Donald Trump become president. I would love for him to not be president so we don't have to do stories about him. But while he is the single most powerful person in the United States and indeed around the world, I am not going to stick my head in the ground for multiple years and pretend that he's not there, that he's not doing horrific damage to our country and the people in it in a number of different ways. If you want media that's going to do that, they exist. You can pretend that Donald Trump isn't president for a few years, but I'm not going to do that. What's your take on Bernie's recent surge in the polls? I mean, I think that he had a great rally in New York. I think that he followed that up with a couple of really interesting proposals. I think that it does not hurt that he has AOC having endorsed him. I think that that's all good. It's also possible that some of his state level efforts, in terms of staff being dispatched to those states, that's paying off. He's a good campaigner. Okay, everybody, we've got less than 15 minutes, so I probably should run, but thank you for hanging out. Lots coming up. Our first story, by the way, is going to be about the horrific battery acid attack. And then we're also going to put it in context of similar sorts of attacks over the past 4 years. So not fun, but very important information we're going to be talking about there. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. I'll see you soon.